Hello and welcome to Senior Solutions, where we bring you topics affecting seniors and their loved ones. I'm your host, Mindy Felinton. You may know somebody who's getting up there a little bit and maybe not eating quite like they used to or stopped eating. Well, my guest today is Susan Wranik, and she's here to talk with us about why, how, and what to do about it. Welcome, Susan. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me, Mindy.
Tell us a little bit about your background.
My background, I'm a speech-language pathologist, and I specialize in neurogenic communication disorders. So that means like post-stroke, post-traumatic brain injury, and I also do swallowing. Speech pathologists, which many people don't realize, we do, as we say, we do speech, we do language, and we do swallowing. We address all three.
And how does that differ? What type of training do you have that would differentiate you from other types of, like a nutritionist, dietitian, when you're dealing with the aspect of the swallowing and eating?
All right.
That was a lot of questions in one.
That was
so
a lot.
You can break it up.
I can't speak to the others. The speech-language pathologist is required to have a master's degree, and we can specialize in adult or pediatric. My area happens to be geriatric, and I happen to focus on communication and on swallowing. The dietitian is a degreed candidate as well. They carry a degree, as opposed to a nutritionist, I understand, is a certificate program. But the dietitian is concerned about caloric intake. Mm-hmm. They're concerned about keeping the weight up, keeping the nutritional standards up. The speech pathologist is the mechanic, the engineer. We're concerned about the technique, the swallowing function, whether or not they're able to swallow the food, whether or not they're able to handle the textures, which would be food, and the consistencies, which are liquids. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. That was very helpful for me to now understand the differences. Because I don't know that the average person in our audience would know the difference.
They don't. And speech and dietary have to work, of necessity, they have to work very closely together.
Makes sense. Mm-hmm. And why is it that people do stop eating?
People stop eating for a variety.
As they age. Obviously, we're not talking about people who are younger.
Younger
maybe
people
from
stop eating too. I mean,
right,
we all swallow. We all swallow all day, every day. Swallowing is for everyone. And people can have swallowing issues at all ages. It's not limited to the aging population. But I define my swallowing into three categories. There are people who can't, people who don't, and people who won't. People who can't generally have some physiologic issue. They might have a serious problem. Maybe they had a stroke. Sometimes swallowing issues can be the first indicator for Lou Gehrig's disease or Parkinson's disease. I don't want to have everybody fearing the swallowing issue. Sometimes it's just muscular weakness, and sometimes things can be remediated fairly easily. Mm-hmm. Then you have people who don't eat, and that's generally a psychological issue. Your anorexia and bulimia would fall into that category. Also, mid-level dementia. People forget. They sometimes pocket food. They hold it in the side, or they hold it in their mouths. They forget to swallow. That is a don't, and it's psychological in nature. And then the last category, and the one that we pay the least attention to, and this is unfortunate, is the won't. You know, we eat to live, and sometimes people make the decision not to eat anymore. And we don't respect that. We tend to regard eating as the lifeline. As long as we can keep them eating, we can keep them living forever. Mm-hmm. I think we need to be more sensitive to the wants. The won'ts.
The won'ts, in what respect? To be sensitive to the fact to honor that?
To honor that. Sometimes people, they generally don't want to eat. They say we have 10,000, they tell me we have 10,000 taste buds. Did you know that?
No.
And they say that by the time we're 60, most of them, 75, 80% are destroyed. I certainly hope not. I mean, I'm still tasting. But as people get older, and even children who are on medication, that medication can destroy the taste, and maybe they don't want to eat. You know how it is when you don't feel well, you're taking an antibiotic. The taste goes, and you just don't want to eat the food. And so it's incumbent upon the rest of us to find out why that person isn't eating and what we can do to make life better. But sometimes when people decide that they've just had enough, they don't want to eat anymore, we need to respect that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I hear you. Of course, me, I can't imagine that I'd ever just eat to live, because I'm one of those who lives to eat.
You've got lots of company, I can assure you.
Yes, I know that, a la the whole diet market out there. So I know I'm not alone. What is your recommendation for people to do, loved ones, when they see a family member who is not eating, depending obviously on whether it's the don't, won't, or can't?
Whatever it is. If somebody's not eating, the first thing to do would be to find out why. So often people rush in and they say, oh, they're coughing, I'm going to change them to a puree diet and a thickened liquid. That's awful. The mouth is the first and the last frontier. It's the way by which we explore the world around us. You know, children, babies, the first thing, everything goes into the mouth. That's how they explore the world, right?
And puppies.
And puppies, yes. But that's our way of exploring the world, the mouth. And it is, for many people, the last choice that they will make in life. Long after they decide whether or not you're going to be fed, whether or not you're going to go to bed, whether or not they're going to change your pamper or take you to the bathroom, long after that, swallowing remains, and it is the last choice that many people will make. Nobody can make you swallow if you don't want to.
So what are some of the things that you would recommend then being, I think in my mind it's more related to the family member or the loved one of an aging adult who is not eating?
There are a lot of reasons. The first thing is to try to get to the bottom of it. I've seen a lot of situations. I had a patient once. I went to the home and visited her, and they said that she wasn't eating, she was uncomfortable, and I walked into her room, and she was slumped over at a 45-degree angle. First of all, you have to find out what's wrong. If food isn't going in, make sure it's coming out. Because if people are impacted, you know, they have to have in and out, in and out. And
a flow.
And yes, and if it's not going in, make sure that it's also coming out. So there would be that need. That would be the first order of business. And in this particular case, I walked in and it was a case of simple positioning. She was all crouched over in the bed. We pulled her up, we straightened her up. She was a lot more comfortable. It was a simple thing, but they hadn't thought of it. And they had to get her positioned properly with back support and so forth so that she could be upright to eat safely, and then things improved. Mm-hmm. Then she was able to take in food, and she was comfortable doing it. You know, eating is a great experience. We know that.
Yes.
Nobody should suffer in the process. There are other issues. Sometimes the muscles, as we get older, you can hear people, if you ask them to say cookie, 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 and it'll come out hooky, 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 you can tell that their muscles are weak. The tonality, the tonicity, I think they call it, the body tone, our muscles become more flaccid. And that's true of the throat as well, the swallow. And sometimes you can just strengthen those muscles. In most cases, I would say to contact a professional. That can either be an otolaryngologist, ear, nose, and throat otolaryngologist. They might be able to tell you what's going on, or a speech-language pathologist.
Mm-hmm. And when you're dealing with somebody who isn't eating, I guess tell us some other people with whom you've helped or worked with to find simple solutions to, like this woman you were sharing, what happened with her.
A lot of times it has to do with ambience. People race around, they're in a hurry, and they feed the family member, and they put the plate on the table, they make sure they have a hot meal, and then they're dashing off because they have a meeting here, they have to take a child to soccer practice there, and the individual is alone. Sometimes they just want to dine, they want to be in company, and it makes a big difference if you just take the time and sit with them. Mm-hmm. That's one issue. Sometimes they can be easily distracted, so sometimes they're overwhelmed if there's too much food on a plate, so you take small portions. Another issue can be vision. The vision can fail, and if you serve light-colored foods on a white plate, this happens a lot in the healthcare communities, now they're using red plates and brighter-colored plates. It's so much more cheerful when you walk in and you see a yellow bowl and a red plate. It makes you want to eat. It doesn't matter what they put on it.
Yeah,
but it's appealing to the eye. And as people get older, sometimes they have like a yellow sheen over their eyes, so they see everything with a yellow film. So you give them the standard white plate with mashed potatoes or rice or an altered diet. It can be pureed, and you've got different mounds of white, which are looking like different mounds of yellow. I wouldn't want to eat that either.
Yeah. not pleasing to the eye.
Yes.
So there's a whole, it's really a science to
presentation. That's
along
what
with
my mother would
location.
say. Yes. But those are just some of the things that you can do. Keep them company, keep a pleasant environment, don't have a lot of loud music, don't have people jumping up and down, no cell phones. Remember, your cell phone is not a person. It doesn't get a place at the table.
Yes, Mom.
and those are things just to create the dining environment. It'll be interesting to see where we go with the boomers and the generation after us, the X and the Yers, because we consume so many of our meals outside the home. But yet, with the greatest generation, no matter what their socioeconomic background, they were taught proper dining and proper table manners, and they're accustomed to sitting for a meal and dining together. It's going to be very interesting to see where this goes in the future.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because I know, speaking about my mom frequently that I do on the show, she always likes to sit at the table and have her meal, even if it's a piece of toast, versus me, I'm standing at the counter.
Right.
Or
we're grazers.
I'm in the car to and fro having a protein bar. So very different.
Nutrition.
Yes. Perhaps, or not. Well, that was very helpful for me to even think about as far as my mom, recognizing that that's an important element, is the presentation. So, thank you.
And you have to think about what people want. For example, sometimes they give you these heavy cups. I always say, I've got it in my advanced directives, if anything happens to me, they have to bring me a thin-lipped cup, and they have to make sure the water's hot for tea. I don't like lukewarm tea. And they have to bring me Earl Grey. And we probably can't mention, brands, but I have my specific brand. And I've got it written down, and I said, that's what I need. Make sure that you bring me that. If you give me a thick-lipped cup, I can't lift it. I can't get it to my mouth, and I feel like I've gained an affliction trying to drink out of a lip on a cup, a mug that's an inch thick.
How interesting. That's something, perspective from which I've never even thought about adding to advanced directives. Are specific things like that. So actually, are there other things that you have in yours that are focused on, obviously, the topic that we're talking about today, that you might recommend that people also think about putting in their directives?
And again, I would do this for the family members to make sure the family member, because the physicians aren't going to have time. They have all they can do to focus on resuscitate or don't resuscitate, CPR or no CPR. But for family members, people have different habits. Some people like a heavy meal at breakfast, a lighter meal at lunch, and something very light in the evening. And it's important to recognize those eating habits. And when people move to another community, to respect that. People think sometimes, I was listening to someone bemoaning the fact that their loved one couldn't get the proper meals in the community in which she lived. And I said, have you tried talking with the staff? Write it up. Tell them what you want. They can very easily have a large meal at lunch and a lighter meal at dinner, but it has to be specified. You have to be clear. Ask. You never know unless you ask. I have a friend that says if you never ask, the answer is always no.
Well said. Appropriate, I should say. So we're going to take a short break, and we will be right back.
Are you getting this, honey?
Oh, prime time. We are rolling.
All right, Mama's going to bring it home. Mama's going to bring it home. Okay.
Come on, watch this guy.
Oh, backwards.
Oh, don't. Okay.
It went into Bob and Carol's yard. Oh, no? Okay, here it comes.
Oh, Mom!
Challenge your kids to be active and eat healthy.
All right, let's see what you can do. All right, let's go.
They might surprise you. Search We Can for more ideas on how you and your kids can get healthy together.
Welcome back to Senior Solutions, where we bring you topics affecting seniors and their loved ones. I'm your host, Mindy Felinton, and I'm joined today by Susan Wranik, who is here talking with us about different things that people need to be aware of and to address when they're dealing with a loved one or they themselves are not eating anymore. And where we left off, Susan, is I wanted to come back to something you were talking about earlier with the musculature weakening, and that's problematic for people. And my question is, relative to that, is there something that you recommend people do prophylactically so that that doesn't happen as they age?
There are a lot of things and a lot of helpful hints. The first thing is to be aware. A lot of people who, and it's not just not eating, sometimes it's a discomfort with swallowing, and people just dismiss it. They're used to it. You can see people struggling when they swallow, and they don't pay attention to that. They move on, they move forward. But if something's not right, find out. No one should suffer in the process of eating. It should be an enjoyable experience. There are a number of things you can do. I would recommend, as I said, getting medical care, finding out what's going on. Tell them what happens when. It could be something like gastroesophageal reflux. We know it as heartburn. They can diagnose that. They can give you medication that can help keep that under control. Sometimes it can be a muscular weakness, and often we can strengthen that and help people have a clearer swallow.
So, and that's what I was getting at. If it is muscle weakness, and is that something that's commonly happens as people age, that these muscles weaken? And if so, is there something that people can do to prevent that from happening?
In many instances, yes, and you would start with a speech-language pathologist. The jury's out on that. Some people think muscle strengthening exercises work. Some people think that they don't work. I know in my clients that they have. My clients and patients, it's helped them tremendously to clear and develop a sharper swallow, and even be clearer in their vocalization, a stronger voice. And they've been able, instead of coughing on thin liquids, they've been able to manage thin liquids instead of having thickening agents. Okay. So I would try. I would definitely try.
Well, I guess, as they say, it can't hurt.
Yes, indeed.
And what are some helpful hints that you have for people as it relates to swallowing?
Oh, gosh, there are a lot of things that people do that. First of all, there are people that take tablets and throw their heads back. Haven't you seen that?
Oh, absolutely.
They chug all the time. That is so dangerous because your airway's not protected. When you swallow, if you put your hand and you swallow, you'll feel the movement up and down.
Yes.
When you swallow, the laryngeal mechanism goes up to protect the airway. It comes back down, then your vocal cords vibrate so you can speak. Swallowing, speaking. It can't be in the same place. Be sure you either tuck your head down when you swallow, or at a very minimum, keep it at eye level. Don't toss your head back.
And
a lot
why?
of people are under the impression that that's the only way they can swallow, because your airway is unprotected. When you swallow, if you put your hand on your throat, you'll feel the mechanism swallow once. You'll feel your throat go up, the larynx come up, and then go down. It's up here to swallow, it's down here to vibrate for speech. And as we get older, it becomes even more difficult to get it up and down quickly. And in no circumstance can it be in two places at the same time.
But how does putting your head back affect that? I'm not clear on that.
It lessens the distance. What happens is the whole laryngeal mechanism comes up, and the epiglottis flips over and closes off your windpipe, your trachea, so things don't go into the windpipe. Your throat is a superhighway. The food can either go into your windpipe or it can go into your esophagus, which goes into your stomach. If it goes into the windpipe, that can result in pneumonia.
Oh.
And it can kill you. That's a good reason why you want to swallow properly.
You think?
Yeah, I definitely think. But I know. But if you, when you lessen the distance that the larynx has to come up to cover the airway, you have a better chance of protection. So that's one thing to be mindful of.
Oh, yes. That's huge. Thank you.
Quiet environments. I told you about quiet environments, eating slowly, and not resting, not being in a flat position after you eat. Be sure to stay up for at least a half an hour after you eat.
Why is that?
Because you digest with a sphincter-like motion, the gastric acids can come up. And if you're lying supine, as they say, flat on your back, or you're resting in bed, even on the couch, that when the digestive process starts and the gastric juices, the gastric acids come up, they can come out and they can burn the esophagus and they can cause irritation, which we know as heartburn. And over time, it can cause a whole lot more problems.
Yeah. Such as esophageal cancer?
That too.
Perhaps.
That too. Miserable heartburn.
Yeah.
Miserable heartburn. It's an experience. If you haven't had it, you don't want it.
It's been a while. Knock on wood. Other helpful hints.
Other helpful hints. Oh my God, I've drawn a blank. Forgive me. We're going to have to cut and paste on this. The one thing I wanted to go into, coughing. Coughing. You want to kill me?
Go ahead. Tell us about coughing.
When somebody coughs, don't hit them on the back. When I do a lot of swallow training for a lot of the communities, I ask them what you do when somebody coughs. You know what the answer to that is?
They hit them on the back.
You don't do anything. You let the person cough, because what they're trying to do is get something out of the airway. Coughing is the body's natural reaction to get something foreign out of the airway. The airway is only for air. And it makes no sense to pound them on the back, because if they're coughing, it's because something's stuck here, not on the back. And beyond that, to give them something to eat or drink, to push it down, isn't going to help. If they're trying to get something up, you wait until that coughing attack has passed and then give them something to drink.
Ah.
And another thing, if you're feeding somebody, remember we talked about the larynx being up here for swallow and down here for vibration, for speech? Not down here, actually. It's down here. It's a little bit further. Too far down there. If you're feeding somebody, especially somebody who's compromised, somebody with dementia, you never want to feed anybody on a voiced cue. Say, ah, and then they stick the spoon in the mouth. Say, ah, because again, you've got the vocal cords vibrating and the airways unprotected. You can model for them. And that's a very good way. For those who are feeding people with dementia, instead of cueing them verbally and telling them, swallow, swallow now, open your mouth, swallow, a lot of times they can't hear and they're not processing that. Mm-hmm. So you get a lot further if you smile at them, touch them, make eye contact, and then you open your mouth. And then they follow you, and then you, just like you're working with a child, you smile, you close your mouth, they'll close their mouth, and eventually they'll swallow. It goes, when you're dealing with a community where they have to assist people with their meals constantly, you want them to do it in an efficient but a very compassionate and kind way. And it makes a whole lot more sense to model for them than to constantly be telling them what to do.
As I'm hearing you, I'm thinking, are you someone who goes around to senior communities and helps to educate the staff?
I do.
So that they're,
I do a lot of training. I do a lot of training with nurses on swallow function to help them understand. Swallowing, you know, we all swallow, and it's one of the areas that's least understood. And I'm particularly concerned about it in terms of end of life. It's just so misunderstood. I have a classic example, and it's happened with a loved one for whom I was caring. This is a great story. A friend of mine phoned me at 7:30 in the morning. You know, my two pet peeves, I have two pet peeves right now. One is lack of communication in the medical field. Amen to that. I'm sure I won't get a lot of negative feedback on that.
That's for sure.
And the other one is the use of atropine, and I'll speak to that later. But I had a friend call me at 7:30 in the morning, a dear friend, and she was terrified. Her mother was 96 years old. She had a diagnosis of Parkinson's for 14 years post. She weighed about 90 pounds soaking wet. She had 24/7 care in her home, lived on the first floor, and I don't know what happened, but the woman managed to fall. And they tried to pick her up, and in the process, they broke her neck.
Oh, my.
Okay? So you have a 96-year-old woman with Parkinson's disease with some cognitive deficits clearly in a broken neck, and now she's not eating. So my friend called me, and she was hysterical, and she said, Mother's not eating, Mother's not eating. And I said, she can't swallow, she's not eating. And I said, well, back up a moment. Can she not eat, or is she not swallowing? Which is it? There's a difference. And she said, I don't know, she can't eat, she's not swallowing, she's not taking on any food, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't just let Mother starve to death. So I asked her what was going on. I asked her where she was. She was in a very reputable hospital. They had a marvelous team, and I asked if the speech pathologist had been in. I asked what the doctor had recommended. She said she had an NG tube, a nasal tube, and she was also on an IV. Now, I told her that she didn't understand why they couldn't use the IV for food. You can't use an IV for food. Your veins cannot support it. So the NG tube was how they were getting her nutrition. And she said, I just don't know what I'm going to do. I can't let Mother die. I can't watch her starve to death. And I explained to her, I said, does your mother express a desire to eat? Is she saying, man, I could really go for a Reuben. I'd really like a hamburger. I would like a baked potato. Or
ice cream.
Or ice cream, indeed, because the proclivity to have something sweet is one of the last taste. People always like the sweet, the sugar. So
Just came to my mind.
Yeah, it's true. And so I said, is that the case? Or I said, or you know, are you saying, oh, Mother, this fresh fruit looks so good, wouldn't you like some fruit salad? Because it could be just a perfunctory, non-content conversation like, oh, yes, honey, that looks so good, I'd like some of that. So we couldn't distinguish there. And I said, whatever you would do, I said, I can't diagnose, I don't know the woman, I can't tell you what to do. I probably would not insert a PEG tube, but speak to your physician. A PEG tube is alternative feeding. And then she said, I just can't let Mother starve to death. What am I going to do? And I said, wait a minute. Not eating is not the same as starving. And this is something the public needs to know in caring for a loved one. Not eating and choosing not to eat is not the same as starving. When a person decides not to eat, for whatever reason, it throws their body fluids into whack and the sodium takes over. And as I explained to her, I said, it puts your body into such a high, such euphoria. I said, the type of high that people paid big bucks for back in the 70s. And she started to laugh. And I said, she's not going to be like a writhing infant in Africa that's dying of starvation. Her body has shut down. She doesn't want to eat anymore. And the body has a natural way of protecting itself. And it pushes you into this euphoria so you don't feel the discomfort, the pain. And she was shocked. And then my comment to the physicians is, you knew it was coming down to this. Why did you not have that conversation with her? Fortunately, she was able to call me at 7:30 in the morning, but not everybody can.
Right.
You have to start the discussion.
Okay. That was good story. Thank you for that. We're going to get ready to wrap up. So is there a community or county resource that people could use? Montgomery County has a wonderful hotline for people dealing with caregiving issues if they want guidance on where to find a specialist, a speech-language pathologist, or if they need transportation or meals. The number is 240-777-3000. 240-777-3000. Great. And if somebody wanted to get in touch with you to find out more information about how a speech pathologist would be able to help them or a loved one, how would they do that? They can contact me on my website, www.speakskill.com, or Susan@speakskill.com. That's my email. Wonderful. Well, this was really helpful to learn more about what a speech pathologist does and how you can really truly help in so many more ways than I ever anticipated when people are dealing either themselves or a loved one who is not eating anymore. And also helping with those helpful hints. Don't put your head back. That was huge for me because I think I do that sometimes. Beware. So thank you. And if you have any ideas that you would like to see on one of my Senior Solutions shows, please feel free to contact me at seniorsolutionsTV@gmail.com. Otherwise, we will see you next time.